Disclaimer: the We Are One podcast aims to shed light on the abuse experience within the independent Fundamental Baptist Church. The stories shared are from survivors who bravely recount their personal experiences. It is important to note that unless an abuser has been convicted in a court of law, they are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The podcast does not serve as a legal judgment, but rather as a platform for survivors to share their truth.
Now let's get into today's episode. Here is your host, Olivia.
Hello, Shawn.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing good.
Good. Yeah, well, I'm really excited to kind of deep dive a little bit about, who you are and your experience with Hyles Anderson and where you're at now in your life. And so let's, get to the basic question. How did you get into the IFB?
So I was actually born into it. I born into the church I grew up in. From a couple months after I was born, as my parents started going, and they went there up until about a year ago.
Okay. What, like where are you from? Like what church?
It's called Landmark Baptist Church in Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool. So, because you just said till recently, did your parents leave the IFB or?
They did. They actually transferred to a still IFB, but I consider IFB light.
Okay.
So a little bit different in kind of how they view rules and not as territorial.
Yeah. Not,
So
not as extreme like, Hyles Anderson and others.
yeah.
Yeah. I will say, I feel like some of like the light versions of the IFB in a way should really just like not like say that we're IFB, right? Like
hmm
they just should just be like we're Baptist, or something. I think it's like when you tie in IFB, it's like, do you really know what you're tying yourself into? Type of thing. So yeah, that's awesome. So what was life like for you in the IFB though?
So growing up, I said I had a decently normal childhood. I did go to Christian school from K through 12th. So this program we use there, if you're familiar, is the ACE
Hmm.
program, so PACES. So grew up doing that. Grew up, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night church. And then when I was a teen, it also jumped into Thursday night soul winning. And then a little bit later was Saturday bus ministry. So, I mean, I was spending almost every day at the church. And then as I got into my middle teens, I was spending pretty much every day there.
Yeah, I mean that's how they get you in a way of like basically telling you like the second that the doors are open, you need to be here type of mindset, whether it's a blizzard or you're risking your life, you have to be there. So
Yeah.
I always say I lived there like definitely in my teen years, like 6 out of the 7 days of the week. Like we were there, whether like in summer, I would help out with like summer nursery in a way for like the ladies to do things around the church and stuff like that. So I was always there too in a way. So you did ACE.
hmm
Talk a little bit just in case someone out there isn't like well aware of what ACE is. Talk a little bit like what all kind of education did you get?
So ACE stands for Accelerated Christian Education. They are, instead of having traditional classroom teaching, you have a desk and then you are given booklets. So every subject has, I believe it was 12 booklets a year that you had to complete. They were work at your own pace. And what you would do is you would complete a section of the booklet. You had on your desk, you had these two flags. You either had the Christian flag or the American flag. You raised one for help, the other to go to what was called a scoring table, which at, I think it was fourth grade, you actually went to a table, pulled out the answer key, and checked your answers. And you marked them either right or wrong. And then you went back and corrected them. So a lot of trust there. I can give them that, and I can say when I was like seventh or eighth grade, I did abuse it, especially in math a little bit. Um, but it's the educational piece. after being out of it and kind of looking back and seeing education in public school now and stuff, I can honestly say the education piece is extremely lacking. I remember being in high school, in the history book in high school, talking about kind of the founding of America and stuff was the Indians just loved the pilgrims and everybody got along and they were all worshiping Jesus and everything was great. And it's a really whitewashed and well Christian nationalist view on history. Looking back now, uh, that and the in high school you had the principal, which our principal had had his I believe his master's in education, so he was very qualified. But outside of him, you didn't really have anybody. At one point, we did have a guy who was straight out of high school, helping people who were still in high school. I mean, he was a smart guy, but he'd graduated high school the summer before, and he was helping juniors and seniors with their schoolwork. And it's like, looking back now, I'm like, it's kind of lacking.
Yeah.
Um, so I do the fact that I walked out of there, and I wasn't the best student, but the fact that I walked out of there with a semblance of education, I was a little bit shocked. So a little bit on me, but a lot on the curriculum.
Yeah, for sure. I know like quite a few people. Like I went to public school, so I got kind of like best of both worlds in a way. I talked about how I got in trouble wearing a NASA shirt and it had like all the, Earth and Mars and all that. And my pastor had told me like I'm never allowed to wear that again and just like stuff like that. But then I was like, but they would always say like if evolution gets brought up, don't listen to it. And for the ones who go to public school, which there was only a few of us eventually, like when we got older. But I know that a lot of people I know personally that went to Christian private school in the IFB, though, like not just like a private school, it was like IFB education type of thing. A lot of them kind of resent their parents in a way because they weren't prepared for a secular college in a way. They didn't have the credits that they were supposed to type of thing, So they felt like they were a little kid having to learn science and stuff like that because it contradicts the Bible. So they didn't hear about it. So I was curious, definitely also for like listeners to understand what AC is, and we brought it up, and Lester Roloff, like he was huge on it, and stuff like that in our series. So what were some crazy rules, like looking back now? Because again, until you're out of it, you don't realize how intense and crazy it is. But what are some crazy things that either took place, like that you had to do, or you had to listen to, or like maybe like your youth era, like had to listen like to what kind of rules?
So are you talking about like in college and high school or kind
Let's
of
let's do high school first.
okay.
We'll get into highs and that,
Okay.
and I'll bring that up.
So the school I went to wasn't ran by my church. My church actually did not have a school, and there was two Christian schools in our area. One of them is where 90% of the people from our church went, and then end up going to the other ones because my mom knew the grade school teacher there. And I'm very thankful for that actually, because out of the two choices, I did like mine a little bit better. Um, so it wasn't an IFB. Actually, the principal that I spent the last 4 years there, he graduated from Tennessee Temple. Um, so they were actually the church that ran it wasn't even Baptist. Now, theologically and pretty much rule wise, they were very, very similar. Um, but sometimes girls had to wear dresses, guys had to wear shirts and ties all day. Um, Actually, our basketball team, we weren't allowed to wear shorts. We had to wear pants to play in, which was very odd looking back.
Yeah.
And but as for rules at school wasn't really anything crazy. I mean, there was some contemporary Christian music allowed and things like that at home, and more importantly at church because that's kind of what set the rules. I mean, Well, let me give is it okay if I give a little bit of background on kind of
Yeah,
how
totally.
so of
Totally.
course I was born in it and raised from birth up until, 22. I through childhood, normal Sunday school, everything like that, everything's great. And then when I hit teen years, seventh and eighth grade, I really didn't. I pushed back a lot on the teen group. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do anything. I hated camp because we went to Mount Salem Revival Grounds,
Okay.
which is in Salem, West Virginia. And I hated camp. And then one year, it was I believe in between my ninth and 10th grade year, I ended up going. Of course, I had to go every year, whether I liked it or not. I had to go to youth conference and camp. But I went to camp at Mount Salem, and John Jenkins was actually preaching. And it was one of those camps to where, I mean, sometimes the altar call would last till 1 o'clock in the morning. It was kind of like, all right, anybody else coming forward? Come on, come on. Very high pressure. And I remember accepting Christ as my savior for like the fourth time there. But, at that point, I was like, this is magical. This is great. How did I go from pushing against this to accepting this? And it was actually from that day forward, like the next day, I kind of gave into the group think. At that point, it was kind of like the Holy Spirit was moving. Looking back now, I believe I had accepted Christ as my Savior earlier. And at that point was when I finally gave away to conformity.
Okay.
I started fitting in with the youth group. I immediately surrendered to preach, got saved one night. Next day, it was surrender to preach because that's what you're supposed to do. And so immediately I did everything, started reading my Bible a lot more, had to go soul winning, wanted to do that, joined a bus route, all those rules. It actually was funny because my parents, like my mom, used to wear pants and stuff like that. And I started at home, I actually upped the rules a little bit. I was like, well, we're going to church and pastor says this, but you're wearing pants. So she stopped wearing pants for a long time because of me. Um, and so we had that, and that is when things changed. So from, I think it was like 10th grade through 12th grade, for the most time, I was as much as I can. I was going to go to Hyles Anderson. I knew that. I was going to be a preacher. I wanted to be just like my pastor and youth pastor. So it gave, all my advice I got from them. And the funny thing was, and this is kind of looking back, when I started doing that is also I got introduced to like Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that because my youth pastor would listen to Rush Limbaugh. So not only was I
My
in,
mom would have it blaring in the car on the way to church and stuff, like his little talk show and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now my mom hated it. She's like, I don't want to listen to that stuff. And but I remember like, and it kind of, I was indoctrinated into two separate things there
Yeah.
from an early age. So when it came to that, so the rule set really, I self-imposed a little bit more. The traditional standard stuff, no movies, uh, no going on really dates or anything. Now music was a big thing. I was listening to like some contemporary Christian music when I was like 13. Stopped listening to that, and I remember my mom found, I think it was like an NSYNC CD or something like that. It was something really innocent, and
Yeah.
she found it in my car when I was 16. I remember her breaking it and smashing it and throwing it away. She's like, "How dare you listen to this evil stuff?" So, though it was kind of the standard rules.
Yeah.
Being a guy, I recognize it was significantly different for me than what it was for, female counterparts because okay, I could wear shorts. I was able to go places, do things. Just couldn't, watch movies or listen to music or things like that. But I mean, I still played basketball at the park for 4 days a week and things like that. So the rules were there, but they were kind of self-imposed for the most part.
Yeah. So, given your answer, I'm assuming that you really weren't a rule, like you didn't break any of the rules, or did you? Did you secretly go to movies? Was there, or were you straight up like anti it, like you were in it?
Yeah, from 16 and through my freshman year of college, I was the one. I was following the rules. Now there was times when I kind of backed away and um the ones like when I was dating a relationship, I kind of backed away and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, I was 100% in it. I wasn't going to do it. It was my calling. If I was going to be a preacher, if you messed up, then it was around that time when I heard Jack Scott's Polished Shaft
Oh,
sermon.
lovely.
So if you didn't
Yeah.
do what God wanted, he would just snap you and throw you away. So I
That
tried,
sermon is insane. Like
yes.
it's so intense and insane. And like everybody was like, Amen. It's like, no. I every time I like, find a like crazy sermon and like all the amens, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I think that's what bothers me the most is
Mhm.
I mean, granted, the sermons are awful, right? These people are lunatics in a way, but it's like all these people who are saying amen, it's like, oh my gosh, don't do that, don't say that, totally. I That's a crazy sermon. Yeah. So
Well, yeah.
you okay, so you again, you were in it, you were strictly like pretty much like the poster of a perfect IFB little preacher boy, type of thing.
Yeah. I tried to be. And
Yeah.
to add one other thing too, I remember in my senior year, because we had breaks throughout the day, because you weren't changing classes or anything. In my senior year, I remember my youth pastor gave me a tape of this preacher he thought was awesome. And he's like, this guy's awesome. He's like, we don't really tell anybody because he's like, don't tell the pastor because he'll get mad. It was Dave Hiles.
Oh,
He gave me a tape of Dave Hiles preaching at youth conference. And I remember listening. I was like, man, this guy's amazing. He never told me what happened, never told me who David Hiles was. He was Jack Hiles' son, and something happened, is all I knew. So here I am on break when everybody else is out, like in the gym playing basketball. I'm sitting there listening to Dave Hiles preaching tapes. And that was kind of what I was doing. So if that gives you an example of how I was, like especially my junior and
you were
senior
in it.
year,
Yeah.
yeah.
You were the guy. I always say, like, there was probably like I have like a couple people in my mind where we would be playing, goofing around or whatever, and then you would have like those few people in the youth group that would be reading their Bible or doing their devotional because they didn't have time to do it, type of like thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, go play basketball. You're fine. Um, that is crazy. Yeah, and Dave Hiles just stressed.
Yeah. Yeah, looking back, I was like, why did he ever give me that knowing what he did? I was like,
Yeah,
wow. But I had no idea until probably 8 years later.
yeah. So, were your parents supportive of you going to Hiles though?
Oh, extremely. From when I was like 8 years old, I used to act like I was preaching and stuff like that. So when I surrendered to be a preacher, my mom especially was just ecstatic. She was super excited and things like that. So they were, yeah, very, very supportive. And that was the church that in the college where my youth pastor went, my pastor went, all my idols went. So if you wanted to be like them, that's where you went. So
Yeah,
it was kind of a no-brainer. It was called, it was the West Point of Bible colleges. So they were extremely supportive. Now I will say, probably after a year or two, my mom started picking up on something. She told me, she's like, something's not right here. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I can't say it, but something's not right. That's kind of as far as she got, but she did start saying that after a couple years.
yeah. So you went to youth conference and all of that. Did you ever go to like college days and stuff at Hiles?
Youth conference was kind of it doubled as that because
Okay.
they always had the first couple of days you'd be at the church, and normally the last night you would go out to the college. You get a tour of the campus. They have fireworks and a bunch of activities at the college. So that
Yeah.
was kind of their college days, because it's a good 7-hour drive up there. I did go for pastor school several times as a teen as well. So any chance that I got to go up there, I went.
What do you think of what do you think of the statue of Jack, and like what do you think of the whole, like, why is there so many pictures of him around just randomly? Like it's, and also Robin from season 1, she had said that growing up she remembered Jack and his wife being in their living room like on a huge frame, and I was like, no way, and she sent me it and I was like, oh my gosh, and she's like, his face would be on mugs, everything, like he was like the Elvis, like, like he
Yeah.
was the top notch. So what did you like? What did you think of like all this statue? Like, because like he has a statue of outside. So I'm curious, what did you think of like the college?
Well, I mean, at that point, it was paying homage to the biggest giant of the faith that lived since John the Baptist. So, when in that, I mean, he was worshipped. There
Yeah.
was not, I mean, that's not hyperbole. He was worshipped. So,
He still is, and he's been dead for what, 24 years?
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and at that point, because I graduated high school in 2006. So it was, not too long after he passed away, several years after Scott took over, but his memory was still there. So everywhere you went, I mean, Hiles, Hiles, Hiles. And I mean, I'd listened to most of his bigger sermons. So I would spend a lot of my time, I said, sitting around and listening to preaching tapes. So yeah,
You
he
ever
was.
did you like make notes? Do you still have that notebook? I would.
I've never been a big note taker, so
Okay.
no. Um, the biggest things I remember, um, and it's a pretty popular sermon, and I think back on this and I laugh now, is he had a sermon where he started out with tapping his shoulders and saying, and he did this for like 30 seconds to a minute, just tapping his shoulders and saying, America's fate rests on these shoulders. And he went on talking about how he'd saved America from communism and how it was basically the whole entire weight of America was setting on his shoulders, and he had saved America from communism through his evangelism and all this stuff. Like, this is stuff he said. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the America rests on his shoulders, he said that. And I remember being like, wow, that's amazing. I want to be that man. And then looking back, I'm like, that is an insane thing to say for
Yeah.
anybody, let
Yeah.
alone a pastor.
Yeah. So how what so for Hiles, because I've had quite a few people from Hiles on, and they talk about how hard it was to juggle work and college. Did you have
Yes.
a job at Hiles, or did you like what did you do?
Oh yeah, I worked pretty much the whole time. So um I had several different jobs. It's I worked at dock worker for a couple trucking companies were my main jobs through college, and then I think I worked at a factory for about a year. And I remember because at that factory, we were making like $9 an hour, and which even then was not a lot of money. And I got a job offer from, I forget, it was R&L Trucking, I believe, for making like 17 or $18 an hour. And I left that job, and the guy who ran the place went to the church. And I remember him because my friend worked there too. My friend had kind of got me the job, and I got this other one. I left, and the guy was absolutely angry. And he pulled me into his office. He's like, "I would never let you date my daughter. You're leaving. You're on loyal," and like went off on me because I was taking a job making double the money.
Like, how dare you? How dare
Yeah.
you give money? Aren't you supposed to give that money to the church anyway? Come on. Come on.
So, but yeah, I did work the whole time. I said back then because my academic background was horrible. So I didn't know how, which they don't teach you to study or anything like that. You're not doing any studying at Hyles Anderson. You're
Yeah.
not doing any learning. It's not education, it's indoctrination.
Hmm.
So, I mean, one of the main classes you have to take as a at pretty much almost every male major is church ed. What church ed is, you take the Hiles church manual and you
The
go,
pink one, the pink
yeah,
book.
yep,
Okay.
you go through it every single semester, pretty much. And that's what that was a class you took. It was almost every semester. You took at the end of the day, and it was just this is how Hiles ran a church. So this is how you're going to do it. This is how he did his ceremonies for weddings, how he says his baptism stuff, how he runs buses.
Do you have that book?
I do. A fated copy.
Oh, we got the high church manual, y'all. Oh man.
Yeah.
So talk about some things in that book. Let's open up that book.
So as I said, this book is pretty much just how he did things. But it's taught as dogma. So this class was probably one of the most important classes you took because you took it every semester. There was no other class outside of chapel that you took every semester. Um, you know, they have things on how to do a building program, how to run your bus, how your seating should look. If you look at a lot of Hiles churches, and same thing happened with Scop, you'll notice not only is the everything the same. I mean, everything's the same from how the altar looks to how the seating is to how the pulpit looks. So that type of idolatry, I mean, is where it started.
Wow, wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I knew that he had like the manual, and I mean, I imagine all of the things. This is what you should do, and thou shalt not do this if
Hmm.
you want, perfect IFB church. Yeah, the idolization for him is it is insane. He is literally the Elvis of the IFB,
Yeah.
truly. Um, I mean, his 40th anniversary video, like them, I mean, like all the signs and the balloons and all the money. I'm like, this is insane. Um, so were you there during this stop like scandal and stuff like that, or no?
No, I was there from 2006 through.
What was your opinion on him though? Like everybody I've talked to is like the proof was in the pudding. He was a weird guy.
I with me, see, and that's kind of thing was, I mean, I thought he was the man. That's how you wanted. I mean, that's the guy I wanted to be. He was suave. He handled a church like a business, and apparently that's what they wanted. So he was, which I never actually. I've always shaken the guy's hand. He was a very intense person. I can say he was very, very intense. Um,
A lot of people said he was very sexual, even when like there shouldn't be anything sexual even brought up. He always had to, like in college and like or like classes and stuff like that.
Well,
So
I never paid attention to that for the fact of I wouldn't have noticed it even if he was outright with it, just because a lot of pastors did that.
yeah,
And it was basically marked off as, well, I'm just telling you what not to do, or I'm telling you this. I mean, I remember his stories about how he basically, I think it was at Pillsbury Baptist College that he went to, how he basically led a one-man revival, saving everybody in the college. And since then, it's been disproven by people that were there. And the biggest thing now is looking back that a lot of his stories, as same with Hiles, were at best made up, and
yeah,
sometimes just straight up,
fabricated.
yeah, straight up lies.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, I feel like that. Definitely like I mean, because you probably experienced this just in general going to camp and stuff. I feel like some IFB pastors they have like the same story that they say over and over and over, and it's like there was this one at camp, and I remember them talking about, and there was like supposed this guy on a mountain and all like I mean it was like intense, right? But
mhm.
then the preacher had done it 2 years later at a bonfire switched half of the story up. And I remember going, wait, this isn't the story. Wait, what? And my youth pastor's wife was like, I think it's a different story. I'm like, no, it's not. He just does not know what he's saying. He can't keep the lie straight, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy. So, juggling work and stuff like that. Did you ever have like a relationship in Hiles or?
So I kind of kept to myself. I went on some dates, dated a few people, but here's actually what kind of led me out. So I'll kind of go chronologically. When I started my first year, freshman year, I was the kid that if you're not here to go full out for God, you need to get out of here. I mean,
You're a sinner.
pretty much. I mean, in our freshman dorm, there was me and five other guys in our dorm room. One of them listened. He had a Reliant K CD. I
Mm,
remember preaching at the guy because he was listening to Reliant K. How dare he listen to that garbage at House Anderson? What are you doing? And I mean, that was me. That kind of, I mean, it's ignorance first of all, but second of all, that kind of unfounded zeal
mhm.
did kind of get tore away a little bit with work. You know, working, you would get up at 7 a.m., get dressed, go to class from 8 to 11. And then from 11 to 12, you had chapel. From 12 to 1, you had church ed. And from 1 to 1:30, you would eat lunch and then it would be off to work. Normally depending on what job I was at work from 11 p.m. till 3 a.m.
Wow.
And then the weekends, you would wake up even earlier. On Saturdays, go to bus meeting. And then Sundays, you were up at 3 or 4 a.m.
Wow.
So it was a lot.
Yeah. That sounds like a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that, I mean, it's intense. And like to think like, also, this is just something I have like realized too with like Bible colleges in general, not just Hiles alone. But like they make you feel like you're not an adult though, right? Because you
Mhm.
have to get approved to go to Walmart. You have to get approved to do this. You have to get approved to that. Like it's like in reality, you guys are, you know, technically adults, 18 and plus or whatever, but most
Mhm.
of them are 20s and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't know. I always thought like when I went to Heartland for like the week or whatever, I thought like this is more of like a intense camp. Like, yeah, we get a little bit more freedom because you get to leave, but you still have to get approved. Like it's just insane. Like it's crazy. What are some things that made you go, okay, this isn't right. I got to get out of here.
So a few things that stuck out to me. So I said in high school I wasn't a great student, and that was because the type of material being taught I now know because I love to read. Have always loved to read, and I credit my reading for a lot of things throughout my life. And with kind of going through that, I remember first thing that kind of stood out to me was I was on the bus route. And we'd be on the bus route and we'd be, the bus route I was on initially, I believe it was South Side Chicago. And I remember being up there and being like, okay, we got to help these people. If these people look like they're having fun, okay, I see some people out and I'm constantly stressed. I'm constantly worried. I'm worried about did I sin, did I not? And I see other people my age and stuff enjoying life. And I'm like, okay, well, their judgment's coming. They're enjoying life right now, but eventually, their judgment's coming. And I remember kind of thinking that, and I'm like, okay, it's a little bit weird to think. And then I also remember we would go up to invite people to bus route. Say, hey, first time, hey, come to church, dress how you want. We're accepting, we're there. You can serve God and everything. And I always remember thinking to myself, yeah, you dress how you want for the first couple times, and then after you get saved, you have to wear a suit and tie, and you have to cut your hair, and you have to style your hair a certain way. Otherwise, well, God doesn't accept you.
Yeah.
And that didn't make sense to me. I was like, well, why are they lying to these? Why are we lying to these people?
Yeah.
Um, hey, come to church. It's great. You can, yeah, come dressed any way you want. But that's not what we wanted. We wanted to mold them into this singular mold.
Mhm.
That's the first thing that stood out to me. The second thing, thinking back, was I remember preaching about, numbers are everything. You have more numbers you have in your church that shows God's power. but only for independent fundamental Baptist churches. If you have a big church that's not independent fundamental Baptist, it's because you're watered down gospel or you are putting on a show.
Mhm.
And that never made sense to me. I was like, well, how can this other church run 20 or 30,000 and we're running 15,000? Does that mean, but they're putting on a show, but we're not?
Yeah.
It didn't make sense.
Hypocrisy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like once you start like just having that little crack of realizing, wait, this doesn't make sense. Like I was telling my mom, like when I would go soul winning and the amount of comments that would be like, just get them to accept Jesus Christ, right? But like we don't really care about the number. But like, and I'm like, you do care about the number. All of
Yeah.
it is numbers to you. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, and the IFB mindset that like me, like it's all about image, and then it's like the whole mindset of like, okay, once we get them in, then about 3 times they visit, then we're gonna start like definitely youth for me. I mean, we would always say first time visitors, they don't have to listen to the culotte roll. They don't have to listen to what I mean. But after I would say about the second or third time, it was like, all right, we got to go get out our toe and give them a culotte to wear. Like it's
Mhm.
like what you said, it's crazy. And the hypocrisy, that's kind of what happened with me with during COVID. We were able to kind of have that excuse like, okay, wait, COVID's happening, and there was a lot of things also that I mentioned in my episode that factored in. But and it was nice though to have those couple months and just like realizing like the whole movie thing or this, even though like again I didn't listen to it, but like just like what am I telling these people on a Saturday? What am I telling my friends? What am I like? That is not that's not me, right? Like I don't want to be that hypocrisy Christian that's like the one who posts Bible verses every single day of their life and then judges and does like I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be the IFBer, type of.
Yeah.
And so that was something also like, but I feel like the second that you have something in your gut or heart that's telling you this is not right, something is wrong, please listen to it because there is a reason why your body, your mind, your heart, something is telling you it's because it's like true.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, that's why a lot of people, like you and I who grew up in the IFB, it was either you were always the rebel kid because it just never made sense even at a young age, or in high school is like when you started realizing, or in college something you know traumatic or something happened. It was like, wait a minute, that's not right. And so I was curious with you, kind of how you got out. How did your parents react? I mean, since they're still in IFB, but given
Yeah.
they had left the church or whatever last year or whatever, how did they react to you leaving the IFB?
So it my leaving the college and leaving the IFB kind of coincided.
Okay.
Um, how that kind of happened was there was, as I said, in the college, one thing you're not taught, you're not taught anything educational. So that really bothered me too. I went there to learn. You weren't, as I said, there was nothing being taught. You were just indoctrinated. Hey, this is how this guy thought. This is how he saw this verse. This is how he thinks. This is what Heil says about it. So this is what you think. You were not taught anything. The most academic class we had was Greek.
Mm,
And that was just a little bit to where, I mean, you couldn't do anything really with it much.
yeah.
Um, so that kind of left me wanting because I was always like, well, I want to learn.
Yeah.
And here I am 3 years later, and I know nothing more about how to read the Bible or history or context or anything like that than I did when I started. And I've taken all the classes. um, so for me, and actually, I was kicked out of Hiles Anderson.
Ooh,
So
finally. It's the rules.
so what happened was my last year, the only reason I was there is because if I knew if I left, my life would be in shambles and I would basically God would throw me away. So I was there out of fear. Um, And actually, the term that I use now, heading into mental health, and it's not I use, but the term for it is religious scrupulosity. It is a domain of OCD that focuses on religiousness, and kind of the rituals and things like that.
Yeah.
And one thing that stands out to me, it kind of explains this, was I remember being at the mall. There was a mall up there, a two-story mall. I went there one Saturday by myself, or Saturday or Friday by myself. And I remember standing in the middle of the mall and tears running down my eyes because I was so ashamed of myself because I'd seen some girls there and I thought they were good looking. I'm a 20-year-old guy, single, and I looked at a girl and I was like, oh, she was wearing a short or something. And I was so evil and wrong because I was lusting. And I remember that type of feeling. And I was like, I hate, and I constantly felt that way because I constantly had normal feelings. Well, in the IFB and high control religions in general, you're taught not to trust your body. Your body is exceedingly sinful. Your mind is exceedingly sinful. Trust God. The heart is exceedingly simple. So you just got to trust me because I'm speaking for God, basically. So that kind of, it came a point where I just kind of broke because I hated feeling that way. It got to a point where I stopped going to church on Sundays. I stopped going to bus route on Saturdays. What I would do is during church, I would drive my car, I would go to the bookstore, and I would spend 3 hours in a bookstore just reading. I mean, I was a broke college student, so I would sit there and read. um, and on Saturdays, I would go to the library. Um, that kind of led me to, I met this girl on it was my first semester of my senior year. I met this girl and we started talking actually on a plane ride home for Christmas break. And when we got back, we messed around a little bit and got found out and got kicked out. Um, Not great how it happened, but I am thankful that it did happen because I never would have left willingly.
Yeah.
So that's how I end up leaving the church. When I got back home, I was very ashamed because I'd been kicked out of the place I that was my destiny. That was God's will.
Yeah.
So I had every intention of going back. Then after being home for about a month or two and got a job and started applying to the local community college, I was like, I'm done. I don't want this. And then as soon as I started college, I basically left the IFB.
Yeah. And how did they find out that you and the girl, like, did it just come out of a conversation? Did someone catch you or?
So it was the day we got back from Christmas break. Um, we had went out in my car, and when we came back like it was like 10 minutes past curfew. For a guy, it was nothing. For a girl, though, especially a freshman girl, I mean, they were asking every question. She just basically told them.
Yeah.
So broke under interrogation.
Yeah. Man, it's so crazy because you guys are adults, but
Yeah.
they don't look at it that way. So after, again, so you're out of the IFB. Are you a believer at all, or where do you stand with your faith?
So with my faith now, it's been quite of a journey, because I really went the opposite direction straight toward atheism because I said I started college, I started actually learning. I found out what an education is, and began to actually learn. And I was still kind of still learning how to study for myself and things like that. And I was so hurt by the experience, and I backed away and kind of said I became an atheist for a while because I didn't really believe anything. Um, that has changed in the last couple of years, and funny enough, is because of where I got my master's, and now working on my doctorate. Because
Nice.
I went to I go to Liberty University.
Okay.
Um, I remember when I was looking for colleges to go for my master's program, I was looking for a college that was accredited and also had the counseling accreditation called KCREP, which is the highest level of counseling accreditation. And the only colleges that really had a good program that was respected and accredited was either Liberty University for distance, of course, was Liberty University or like Walden University, stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, Liberty kind of they had a sports team. I kind of liked belonging and things like that. So I end up going, and I was very hesitant because I was like, man, this is like jumping back into the fire. Um, but I do remember I was like, it's okay because I mean I remember sermons where Scott was preaching against Liberty University, how evil they were, and things like that. And thankfully, I went to Liberty started after Falwell Jr.'s whole fiasco and
Yeah.
all of his BS. Um, so, because I think if that kind of would have happened, if I was there, I would have been really put off.
Tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, but after, they kind of started separating themselves from Christian nationalism a little bit and things like that. So I ended up going, and in the counseling program, I can say my education was outstanding. Um, they prayed before class sometimes. They would
Yeah.
have Bible verses at the end of their things. We had to integrate a Christian worldview into our assignments, but they were very accepting, very tolerant, very focused on social justice and multicultural values, um, and these core foundations of counseling and things like that. So they were excellent. And I remember one thing that stood out to me because we had an integration class, and the professor came up and she said, first thing I'm going to say about this class is if they don't mention religion, you don't say a word. Client centered, client led. And she drilled that into us with that religion is not something it is a worldview. If they want to talk about it, you can. If not, then it is highly unethical to do that, which it is. So I said, my education I've been extremely happy with. Um, and now that I'm out and working with people who have education from a bunch of different colleges, yeah, I mean, I would put it right up there.
Yeah.
But being,
Awesome.
yeah, but being able to see people who didn't have these strict rules, didn't have sometimes had a little bit different theology, came from different backgrounds, studied science. I mean, were researchers, but still could have a personal relationship with God. I was like, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
It's kind of like
yeah.
it's like, wait, what? There's actually Christian people out here that have real struggles that talk about their mental health. Like, wait, you're open about like anxiety and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, wait, what? Like, I've always got told like that's bad and stuff like that. So it's like, it's a shock for sure.
Mhm.
I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
this
what I
maybe,
want to know about liberty, though.
yeah, and this is something you may or may not have to edit out because it may make people mad, but one of the things I saw, I had a very hard time kind of with scientific, the creation of the earth, inerrancy of the Bible, things like that. I couldn't justify a lot of that with scientific research. And I thought, well, I can't be a Christian and not believe those things. And
Yeah.
then actually about a year ago, I found some branches of Christianity that, it's more about the relationship, not about, okay, the Bible is not a science book. It's not treated as a science book. Um, I started listening to actually biblical scholars that respected the Bible, were Christians, but they didn't think it's not a history book. It wasn't made to be a history book. So that also opened my eyes to, okay, I can be scientific minded. I can believe in things like evolution and still be a Christian. And that was some things that really that's what really pushed me back in. I said a little bit controversial sometimes, but I said for me it's a personal relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, I always say you don't have to go to church to have a relationship with God. You
Mhm.
can worship Him in your car, in your shower. You can do whatever. It really comes down to just having a relationship with Him. And church hurt is very real and
Yeah.
very, I've said this on multiple episodes, and I truly do believe it that I think most people who identify as atheist or agnostic are because they're just have church hurt. And they're like, if that is God, I don't want nothing to do with it. So it's like, let
Mhm.
me push that out. Let me go the other route. And I get that now, definitely. I mean, if if I would have said, if someone had told me that, I would have said this 4 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, I
Mhm.
said that. But now speaking with so many survivors, just about their experience and stuff like that, and everything they've gone through, and like looking back on like my life and stuff like that, I'm like, truthfully, I get it. Like I
Yeah.
understand. And so I think like, for me, it's just like created the podcast to have a safe platform for anyone to come on and share like their life and their experience in the IFB. So then if anyone's watching this or listening to it, then, you know, they feel less alone because I know what it's like to feel alone. To feel like, okay, I must be crazy because nobody else is bringing this up. Nobody else is
Yeah.
acting this way. Nobody is acting like there's an issue. So maybe, and then, you know, creating this, whatever, and getting
Mhm.
to meet people like you and others just to be able to have this real authentic conversation. Like, no, we all are one. Like, that's not
Mhm.
just a title of the podcast.
Mhm.
It really is. We are one, whether we're 2 miles away or 1,000. Like we are,
Mhm.
because the IFB really is a small world. Everybody's tied
Yeah.
into everyone, and once you go down that rabbit hole, it's insane to
Yeah.
discover that they really aren't independent the way that they say and put their name in. So now you are a therapist.
Mhm.
And what were some things that when you went into becoming a therapist, like, was it because you wanted to help people, or was it just something that you've always like, I mean, obviously you knew you were going to be a preacher, but was it
Yeah.
always something though, like you wanted to help others, or was it
Yeah.
because you went through all of this and you thought, let me go this route?
Yeah. Well, I will say to address something you did say earlier. I do believe that a lot of people that, end up agnostic or atheist that grew up in religious backgrounds do have church hurt. There are atheists and agnostics that have had positive church experiences, but they just don't, they don't believe the science and things add up, which that's, okay. So I did want to address that because I've heard that weaponized a lot. Oh, you're just hurt. You're hurt. That's why you're an atheist or agnostic. No, that's not the case. It is the case for some people, but not for everybody. That's why I wanted to address that. And not I don't think you meant it that way, but
No,
but yeah.
I think a lot of people, once you get out of a high strict religion, no matter
Hmm.
whether it's the IFB, Mormonism, any of it,
Hmm.
it's if that's what it's like, then let me, like, most people do a 360 basically
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
all aspects of their life. And then you have the IFBers who are like, see, this is what happens when you get out of the church. They use you as the poster.
Yeah. Oh, he went to college and he was indoctrinated. And
Yep,
yeah.
this is what happened. So you don't do that. And it's like, no, you guys maybe do a 360 because you guys are
Yeah.
lunatics, type of thing. So no, I never wanted to like weaponize it or do that. I just think truly that most people, no, I know people personally that have said, hey, I went to Heartland
Hmm.
and things did not add up, and I looked at it scientifically and all this stuff, like, because they
Yeah.
said growing up had a positive experience, my parents were
Hmm.
cool, but then they went and I was like, okay, and like
Yeah.
we left it as that. I was like, all right, cool, like, do you, I'm gonna do me, I'm gonna treat you with respect, type
Yeah.
of thing. And so yeah, I just, mainly the people I talk to though, they always say like they want to get back in church, they just don't know how, they don't know where
Gotcha.
to start, they believe in something bigger, but they don't know exactly, like they have that,
Yeah.
uncertainty, I think, basically. So
Hmm.
I totally get that though.
Yeah. But to answer, your original question of I've always wanted to help people. When I looked for a career, one of the things I had a few things. I wanted to always have to learn. So I wanted to always be learning in order to be relevant in the field or job I was in. I wanted to help people. And, I did want a job, obviously, that had some respect and things like that.
Yeah.
And, growing up, I'd never been to therapy. My only thing about therapy was you had pastoral counseling, and I'm using that word very loosely.
Very loosely, they will give you a
Yeah.
Bible verse and tell you Just do that.
Yeah. Yes. So pastoral counseling was the only introduction I had to counseling. Going through when I was about it was about 4 years ago, I actually sought counseling to kind of work through some of the stuff that I'd gone through because it was affecting how I viewed day-to-day life. The religious scrupulosity was still affecting me. It had transformed into OCD-like symptoms. I didn't have OCD, but there was some like symptoms there. So I started going to counseling, and it transformed my life for me.
That's amazing.
It was outstanding, and I was like, wow, I want to help people like this. I was at a sales job, and made great money and everything. I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it was kind of reminded me of that I don't like being disingenuous, so I didn't like sales. And it wasn't a sleazy sales job or anything. It was,
It wasn't your calling though. Like,
yeah,
like when you get like I always say you get that itch, you're like, I want more. I want like I wasn't made just for this. I
yeah,
wasn't made just for that. Like for me, as a woman who grew up in the IFB, like I wasn't just made to be a mom. I wasn't just
hmm
made to be this, that. Granted, I would love to be a stay-at-home mom eventually, but like what I'm saying is like people, like definitely girls, when you hear that, your whole and it's like, no, you were made for more. You can
yeah,
be a doctor. We need women doctors. We need
hmm
women scientists. We need women, like we need that. We need men who are can be a chef, even though that's down because women are supposed to be in the kitchen. It's like, no,
yeah,
we need that. And so you didn't get your calling until this. You're like, I
yeah,
want there's something more. And that's
yeah,
that's amazing that you went for it and you're trusting, like basically, what, this is what I was made for, to help others. Because if you look at it, if you are, and I think this, if you truly know the Bible and you know it, and you're not indoctrined with man-made rules, and you're just looking
hmm
at the Bible, whatever, a pastor is like a teacher. They can help people, right?
yeah,
If they know the Bible, but not like how
yeah,
IFB pastors, they go
yeah.
lunatic.
And that's kind of
And
leads
so you
into
probably always had
yeah,
that feeling like, I need to help someone, right?
yeah,
But you just thought, I have to be a pastor to do that. And it's like, no,
hmm
I can be a counselor. I can do this. So
hmm
that's amazing. I'm glad too that you brought up that you went to therapy and this is where you're at, because the stigma with men especially opening up and stuff. I hate that, but I know it's with egos and stuff like that, and you get told from older generation. I think it's a generation thing too. Like if we look back at our grandparents and stuff like that, it was like, oh no, we don't talk about that, we just brush
yeah,
it off and we go about our next day. Oh, we don't say that, whatever. And so I'm happy to know that at least, like, my generation and younger generations and millennials are like more open about it,
hmm
and trying to end that stigma. So well, Shawn, this is a great episode, and I'm
I'm
really
sure.
excited for, so many people, whether they went to Hiles or they are just,
Yeah.
our listeners, to listen. I appreciate you so much coming on
hmm
for and speaking and bringing awareness, about your Hiles experience, your IFB
Yeah.
experience, and also a little bit about therapy too.
hmm Yeah, and I appreciate you having me, allowed me to talk about things. It's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
I'm finally glad to where I'm heading, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of tell people about that journey.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear the feedback. And yeah, so stay tuned for next week's episode.